We
give
saw
us
earlier is
a
Dr. David Ragland. He's out of Ferguson. I met him in Ferguson, and a couple of years ago in 2019, he had a reparations panel, and he brought a bunch of people together to talk about reparations. And one of those individuals was this young man here, whose grandfather, receives a check from Germany, as a reparations check. And I thought it's a really interesting point because we don't hear a lot about that, right? We don't hear a lot that other countries are dealing with reparations in a better, far better way, or at all, than we do here. So I guess if you roll the clip,
Wow,
it'll
so
speak
this
for
is a
itself.
story of a actual reparations check, an
Yeah.
actual
Yes.
reparations check.
Yes.
So let did I spell reparation? I'm a bad
Yeah.
speller. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
So let's play the video. This is the first video. Let's listen.
My grandfather is a Holocaust survivor. His name is Karl Voltman. My grandfather's family is from Poland. My grandpa survived the war, but his mother and his father were killed. All four of his grandparents were killed. Killed in Treblinka, or they're killed in the hometown of Stashev. And I grew up watching my grandfather live every day with the pain of what happened to him as a child. And my grandpa, though, receives a reparations check every month. I believe it's $700. And you know, the check does not in any way independently repair his relationship with Germany, but it does something. And I've been really moved to learn about what the German country and the German people have done to try to right the wrong of the Holocaust. I've been to Germany very briefly. I haven't been to Berlin yet, but I've heard that when people visit Berlin, there's stones that are in the residences of German families, or Jewish German families that were killed. And I've been really moved by what the German government has done in welcoming immigrants to their country, and the role that the German government has played in trying to chart a new course and really own their past. And I have hope that we can learn from the way in which the German country has owned their past here in America by owning our own past of racial terror. And that reparations can be one step, both financial reparations and otherwise.
Yeah, let me play the second part of this to finish off. I think this is it right here. But this is a great story to those as to say it can be done. It is being done. So don't tell me you can't afford it. Don't tell me there's no way of doing it. Don't tell me the checks, when I want to send you direct payments, it can be done.
We white people have benefited tremendously from the powers that be, the privileges that we have, and that comes with a responsibility to know that be responsible for the fact that we can't let this continue. And Brian Stevenson talks about race and racism as if a smog, and I think this indifference that we seem to have, it's like almost like this elephant or the smog that exists where it clouds our ability to truly be in a relationship with each other. And engaging in reparations work is an opportunity for white people to take this head on, and as an opportunity for our own atonement. Atonement happens, I believe, in part through action, and the words "I am sorry" is an action, but so too commitment to dedicate financial resources to support the liberation of Black people could be a very monumental action. It's a way for us to cleanse our own souls as white people, and also to help continue to build relationships with Black people who are our friends, our neighbors, and fellow citizens.
Thank you.
And this is an interview you did yourself. You conducted.
Yeah.
Yourself?
Yes. Yeah. There's a general rule. All the interviews I ever post, I've done. Otherwise, I will frame someone else's interview. So as a general, if you see my interview up there, I took it.
White people.
Let me take that off. Sorry. Go ahead now.
And yeah, I thought it was a very important story because it's an untold story, right? We have to tell the story, not just about what other countries have done, like Germany, and that's important, but we have to also tell the story from white perspective as well. And what I mean by that is, let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, YouGov did a survey, and they asked the question, do you believe that slavery has had a significant effect on the black-white wealth gap today? And 73% of African Americans said, yes, it does. And only 16% of whites who responded said, yes, it does. Which tells me 84% of whites, if that survey is correct, have absolutely no idea about the impact of slavery. That it's more than a what's your position on reparations. We need a mass white education project to bring people together. And it's not just the Republicans here. 34% is liberals have no clue if they don't think that slavery had an impact on the white-black wealth gap. So we have to look at this as an opportunity to educate white people. Some white people are never going to come along. I get that. Oh my God, I didn't do anything. I didn't own a slave. I get that. Go away. But there's a portion that we have to talk to and we have to educate and understand that your status today, as the young man said, I benefited. All white people benefited from slavery economically, indirectly. We have to educate and talk about that and tell the truth so we can bring those numbers up.
That is such a great point, because I think honestly when you look at the massive resistance to the idea of reparations, it's mostly rooted in ignorance. There have been a lot of white comrades who I deeply appreciate who said, I didn't really know that much about reparations. I didn't think it was important. Then they saw our coverage of it. They're like, oh, okay, I see, I'm on board. Like, it's just a lot. And this is, I'll give you guys an example. And we were talking about slavery. You brought slavery. That's a good example. But there are a lot of white people, they will say stuff like, well, you wasn't a slave, so why should you get reparations? I'm like, it's way more than, like, even if you don't agree with the generational wealth argument that we were making, there's redlining, there's civil asset forfeiture, there's broken windows policing. You guys know civil asset forfeiture targets Black Americans at a 65% rate, and we are 13% of the population. Our state has imposed aggressive fines and fees against us, allow Wall Street to literally commit mortgage fraud, which tanked our wealth. So people just bring up slavery. Yes, slavery was a giant thing, but if you look at everything in between, the lynchings that they did that was coordinated with law enforcement, what do you think happens to a white people? Please think about this. What happens to a family if your primary breadwinner is lynched? You got a mother, you got a father, you got 2 kids. The father is lynched. What happened to that family economically? Thousands of families were impacted by this. That is not slavery. We talking about the 1900s.
Right. Then, what about kidnapping?
Yes.
And not knowing your ancestries. What's the value of not knowing where our family's from in Africa? What's the value of our language being like? It's because they're told this one-dimensional story of slavery. Yeah, we brought them over here in some boats. They don't really even describe the boats, so maybe they think it's a cruise ship or something like that. So they brought them over here. They brought them over here in some boats, right? And they got here, and it's almost like they tell the story where they just basically worked overtime. They worked a lot, and that's it. They picked cotton, and we're not telling you what the value of all that cotton they picked and how that helped build our nation and how it helped do all this stuff. That's completely irrelevant. That's all they did. Yeah, there were a couple of rapes here and there, but nothing massive. There were a couple of hangings, and there were some people at white sheets and they burned, but that was all in the past. That has nothing to do with now. And it's the absurdity of it. But I don't, when in that poll where it says only 16%, I think if you took a lie detector test, that would be like 90% wouldn't think that, yes, we should probably give them. It's a it's part of white culture to resist the idea of atonement to slavery, because it's an acknowledgement that your pristine America is great is all a joke. So you have to make slavery a footnote and not, this was a slave state. This wasn't a footnote. It was a slave state. The reason why we even became a superpower was because we were able to build up this value and create this production. It's no other production in production of the amount of product that slavery was able to produce. There's nothing in human history that comes close. When you're talking about the production of a society, there's nothing in human history that comes close. So it's all about denying. It's all about denying history, because it's almost like American white culture is to sugarcoat everything. It's to we don't want to really talk about that, and it's never to really address things. Go ahead.
That's why much props for Chuck talking about it, because we need maybe I shouldn't do this, but I was about to say white allies. Maybe I shouldn't assume, but we need people out there making those strong arguments that outside of our community as well. Let me just say it that way. There are a lot of people. To your point, that's such a great point, CJ. This atonement is there's a debt owed as well, and there are a lot of white people that just can't swallow that pill that their society, their generational wealth is because of this. Because of slavery. Right. So if we pay reparations, that's something they admit. They will have to admit that, which is actually part of the healing process, which makes it extremely important. Now, to show you guys how ridiculous these people are, they pretend that we are radical for asking for reparations. They pretend that we are asking for a once in a no one ever did this. You guys are asking for a government to pay you guys. What is that? People pretend that it's not a thing. Slave owners got reparations. Asian people, who was Japanese people, I should say specifically, who were locked up because Japanese internment camps was paid reparations, and I think they should. The Colombians, the Colombian vice president, the first ever black female vice president, she ran on a ticket of the United States and the Colombian government paying their people reparations for pushing the drug war, which I support. I support reparations for the Palestinian people. I support reparations for the people who was had their rights violated at ICE detention camps. Reparations is literally the most class-based struggle you can ask for, because you are demanding the ruling class pay the workers and the people who was exploited their labor back, their generational wealth back. It is
there is an economic capitalist slant framing to this whole reparations argument, because if you pay black people reparations, who's going to work all these low-paying jobs? That's how they're looking at it. Because you gave people extra money for unemployment. Have you heard what they thought about that? That's why nobody's coming back to work. Imagine if they gave black people the amount of money that we're owed every month, and black people had the ability not to have to work these terrible jobs, not to have to work 60 hours a week and be with your family. Imagine that. They can't have that. So it's more than just denying history. There's also a capitalist framing that we can't pay labor more. It's about keeping labor costs down. And paying black people, that's paying labor for something we did. And it's keeping that labor pool from doing these terrible jobs that we can't get anybody to do unless we force them economically by taking away opportunity. That's essentially what it is.
Anything you want to add, Chuck? I have one more. I think this is a lighter story on this, but anything you want to add on the reparations story, Chuck? Before
tell your story, but CJ's point was really good. I never really thought about it in that light. So that's one more angle that I think is very important. I was just
and what do you mean? And what point did you not see it in that angle when you say that?
Well, I don't know if I didn't see. I didn't consider it. You're talking about the labor angle, that if reparations were given, we can't fill these jobs. I was thinking about it from the moral angle.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
From, hey, you know what? If after this show I steal both of your wallet, you know what? You need to get your wallet back. And if my grandparents did the same, you still need to get it back.
Right.
So I've looked at that angle, and you've added one more angle to talk about the resistance that we're up against.